Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience Podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions.
Almost 2 years, never paid the mortgage.
Wow.
And the sheriff said, you have 24 hours to get out.
Yeah.
I went, what?
Yeah.
And so my contract had not been renewed. And that's a different story. Also had to do with baseball, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But we put everything in storage. I had 2 big dogs and 4 cats and nowhere to go.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine, a dear friend, she said, come to Phoenix and come live with me. I said, you live in a condo. She had a brand new condo.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I have 2 big dogs and 4 cats. She goes, put them in the car and come. And so I came back to Phoenix, and my old boss at Channel 10, I worked here for 2 years. He goes, I'll have a job for you in 4 months. And I'm like, great, that's great. I'm going to be back in TV in Phoenix because I love Phoenix. Well, then one day I opened the newspaper and he got fired.
Oh, geez.
And I didn't have a job.
Yeah.
And my agent finally said, look, I don't know what you want, but I couldn't get a job. So I went to a sports bar to try to be a bartender.
Mm-hmm.
And I will never forget, I told the manager, I said, look, I can entertain your clients, whether they're sober or not.
Mm-hmm.
I can talk sports with them all day. And he looked me up and down and said, I don't think so.
Wow.
And I realized he wanted a 24-year-old in a short skirt and a push-up bra.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a rude awakening. And then I realized the only thing I knew how to do to make money was to be an official.
Right.
So I went back to football and baseball, which are played year-round here in Arizona. And I went from anchoring Sportscenter to working Pop Warner football and Little League baseball. And I didn't want to see anybody I know. I did a whole lot of feeling sorry for myself.
Yeah.
And all I did was complain. Oh, my husband's an alcoholic. I can't get a job in TV. And another one of those strange things happened. I was sent out to work a baseball game with an umpire I'd never met before. I went out and turns out he became my baseball partner for 5 years. He was a Vietnam veteran, war hero, shot, limped, had post-traumatic stress, Agent Orange poisoning, which eventually killed him at 60.
Mm-hmm.
But for 5 years, we were partners, which meant, now I don't know if you ever noticed the officials, like if you're not doing a varsity game, you dress in the parking lots and you're there an hour before the game and an hour after the game. And so we talked all the time. And my buddy Don was a very troubled Vietnam veteran, father of 8, wonderful, kind man who did 2 tours in Vietnam, special forces. And I would complain about my life, and then he'd tell me war stories.
Wow.
And after a while, I went, I'm a jerk.
Yeah.
I
gotta stop complaining.
Jerk. I'm like, how can I be whining when this man went through such horrible things? Yeah. And yet he never complained, and he always felt it was his need to protect me, which was pretty funny sometimes. Big man, hands the size of hams, Mm-hmm. And slowly but surely, I started to realize that the things I thought were important were not.
Yeah.
And some other people I knew kept saying, why aren't you a teacher? Why aren't you a teacher? I said, I don't want to be a teacher. They said, you spent your life officiating kids. And so at 42, I went back to college, got my teaching cert, and got my master's degree. And I ended up teaching in the most inner city school in the state of Arizona. Title I, all my kids lived in poverty, gangs, drugs, weapons, pregnancy, foster care, everything you can think of. And slowly but surely, I realized how spoiled I was and how much I had. And it was funny because when I became a teacher, I was a hard ass. Mm-hmm. I was in the media, right? Yeah. You're on time. There's never an excuse. And one day I taught a video production class. My kids did a show called Jaguar News. And one day I was giving them all crap because they were late. Their stories weren't done right. and they all got up and left. Every kid in my class left.
Hmm.
And I stood in front of an empty classroom and I cried.
Oh.
And this little teacher had been teaching for like 30 or 40 years. She came in and patted me on the shoulder. She goes, "It'll be all right. It will be all right." And then another teacher took me aside and she said, "Have you ever considered being nicer?" I go, "Nice? There's no nice in a newsroom. There's no nice on a football field." I'd never had to be nice.
Right.
He said, "You know, you might be a better teacher if you learn to be nicer."
Hmm.
And then one more thing happened. I was teaching a class. This kid was late every single day. So I got frustrated. I took him out. I read him the riot act. And he's looking at his shoes. He goes, "I'm so sorry, Miss Montgomery. I'm sorry I was late, but I was sleeping on my uncle's couch last night. And I didn't know the bus system because I hadn't been there before." And I said, "What do you mean you were sleeping on your uncle's couch?" He said, "Well, I never know from one night to the next where I'm going to be sleeping." And I went, "This child is homeless." And something switched in my brain. And I went, "Okay, I need to change. I need to look at each kid individually. I need to figure out what they're dealing with and to see how I can help."
Hour of questions.
It so changed my dynamic of what I thought was so important in life. None of the stuff I thought was important was at all. And the fascinating thing about all that is that I was unable to have children, and that bothered me for a while. And then when I was 55, I mean, at the end of the school year, I worried about my students because they lived in abject poverty, ghetto, bad stuff. So I would always put my phone number on the board. I'd say, "If you get in trouble, call me. I'll
Mhm.
try to help you if I can." Now, they always told you never to do that, but I did anyway.
Right.
And I got a call from one of my students. He was just a quiet little shy kid who I barely knew. And he was in foster care.
Mm.
And I said, "Yeah, but I'm going to have you put back in my class," because the kids could take my class year after year. So I got to know them pretty well. And I said, "Brandon, I'm going to put you in my class next year. So I can't wait to see you." Right. And he didn't show up.
Mm.
And a couple weeks went by and I was very upset because I didn't know where he was. His phone number was disconnected. And he called me
Mhm.
and he said, "Miss Montgomery, I'm hungry." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, they lock up the food every morning and I'm in a new school and they didn't get the paperwork, so they won't give me lunch."
Mm.
And I'm so glad there weren't kids in my class because I started swearing up a storm, marching up and down the hall. And this teacher who told me I should be nicer came
Yeah.
out. She goes, "What's the matter?" And I explained what happened. She goes, "Well, if you care so much, then you call the foster care people and say he can come and live with you."
Yeah.
I said, "Don't be ridiculous. I'm
Right.
55. I've never been a mother."
Right.
And she said, "Then stop complaining."
Right.
And I called foster care and I ended up with 4 kids and I'm a grandmother today.
Yep.
And they were all my students
Yeah.
at some point.
Yeah. I
So
had I had a champion for the foster care system on last week, and it was one of the most emotionally gut-wrenching interviews I've ever done in my life.
the stories will rip your heart out. I
It
mean,
just he
I
did.
I have 2 kids who are my legal foster children. I have 2 one that was mostly homeless
Yeah.
and one that chose to call me mom.
Yeah.
And we don't care who, we don't label people here. When
Right.
it's funny when people say, "Well, do you have any children?" I used to mumble my way through, "Well, I'm a foster mom." But when I went to foster mom school, which is a thing, I went for 10 weeks to foster mom school. They say you don't call children step. You don't call them foster. You call them your sons and daughters, and that's
Right.
what we do here. They're
Right.
our sons and daughters.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I look back and I go, if I'd stayed in TV, I would never have been a mother. So I think life zigs and zags on us, and we have to be open to that
It's all
because
part of the plan.
I wouldn't change much of anything, but I would have been nicer sooner. I think
Mm.
that's what I would change.
Yeah.
So
But
yeah, I taught
but
20 years.
here's the thing, you'd have never come to that epiphany if you hadn't been,
No,
right? So
you're
if
right.
right? That had to happen. That's part of life and it's part of a lesson that's learned and something that people that are listening to this interview are going to learn because of you.
That
You see
nice
what I'm
matters.
saying? That's why we're doing what we're doing,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I have to say, it wasn't easy. Again, I did a lot of feeling sorry for myself because wow, I'm not on TV, poor me.
Yeah.
But honestly, I look back on it now, I wouldn't change anything.
No, it was
Really wouldn't.
grounding for you.
It was. It
It
made
was
me
absolutely grounding for you.
And here's the really weird part. I am an author, as you know.
Mhm.
I have 5 traditionally published books with another one coming out in the spring in June. I
Junior.
never write about sports.
Yeah.
I write about societal issues like child abuse and domestic violence and cults and PTSD and many of the things that rape
Mm.
because many of my students were raped and by family members and nobody cared. And so all of these societal issues I ran into as a teacher became the basis for a lot of my books.
Yeah.
And people are always shocked. They're like, "You don't write about sports?" I'm like, "No, I don't."
Yeah. It was almost a past life for you.
You know what? It is, and it used to be sports were my world from the time I was 5 till I was, I don't know, 60 maybe, because I continued to officiate,
Right.
but they weren't the most important part anymore. And I'll be honest with you, I read the sports page, but I skim it. I used to read every word
Yeah.
religiously. Now I'm like, not so much.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've had a fabulous life. I tell the kids if I went down in a plane crash, I've had a great time. Have a party in my honor
Yeah.
because I can't say I've missed a whole lot.
You haven't. You've done a lot of living.
I have.
You've done a lot of living, and you've also done, to your credit, a lot of discovering.
You mean about
You've discovered parts of you that you didn't know existed,
that? You are absolutely right. I
right?
did. Yep.
30 years ago, if I'd have come walked up to you and said, "You're gonna be a grandma," you'd have gone, "Huh, I don't think so. I can't have kids."
Right. Right. And then it always amazes me. My oldest son, and the other thing is my oldest son's Hispanic. I have a black daughter, a black son, and a white son, and a Hispanic son. And so it's it's kind of like the rainbow world here.
Right. I
Now,
was just thinking colors of the rainbow. Yeah,
yeah,
perfect.
and my Hispanic son is came from very, very bad story. But at least once a week he texts me and says, "I love you, mom." It's really important. And I didn't come from a family where people ever said that.
Yeah,
I'm Irish and we don't do that.
we
And
don't.
no, we don't. And so I'm very lucky that my partner taught me how to say I love you back because my world, you didn't do that. Nobody hugged me when I walk in the door. My parents
Right.
weren't like that. And
Mine
so if he hadn't taught me how to respond, I would have disappointed the kids. So yeah, I've learned a lot of things. I think we have to be open that life's going to keep changing and maybe we have to keep changing with it.
Yeah.
What happens
And,
if we stay static?
I have to say something. Thank God for that teacher that came in and patted you on the shoulder and said, "It's gonna be okay,"
I know.
who then turned to you and said, "You know what? You can stop complaining if you're not gonna do something about it."
No, 2 different teachers. 2
Well,
different teachers, both named Ann,
right,
ironically.
right,
But yeah, she said, and it was funny because the woman who told me to be nicer is the nicest person on the planet.
right.
And she found me abrasive, which I was. I was, but you spend time in a newsroom, everybody's that way.
Well,
There's
you
nobody
spend
going
time on
around.
a football field, you're gonna be a little
Yes.
abrasive too. Let's be honest, right?
Or an umpire. I mean, I've
Sure.
got people screaming at me. What am I
Right,
supposed to do? Be nice back? So
right,
my whole world was newsroom sports crazy. No one was very nice. And as an official, no one's nice to me. You
right,
know, I used to think it was because I was a woman. No,
right,
I was dressed like an umpire, which
right.
means I hate me. So
Zebra
yeah,
stripes, right?
right.
Yeah,
Right. So when I'm dealing with children who are just having horrible situations in
yeah,
their lives, it never occurred to me to behave any differently.
yeah.
So, yes, I learned. Took a
And you know
while.
what's amazing is, and this is what this other, author talked about too, is these children, and I have a very good friend that was a social worker for 40 years, and she used to tell me, she's like, "Thank God for foster parents,
It's
because
hard though.
they're the people that at 1 o'clock in the morning, and we have nowhere to go with this child, at 1 o'clock in the morning, they get that call, and they come get them, and when nobody has loved them in their life, that foster parent does. And what it really boils down to is these are children that just want to be loved. That's it. It's
Right.
not it's not complicated. It's just love them.
Well, but that's not enough. People think it's enough. They get frustrated when they adopt a kid or they take in a kid, especially I took in teenagers who
Mhm.
had lots of baggage. It's one
Right.
thing to take in a brand new infant who hasn't had to deal with anything,
Right.
but
Something else with all that programming. Yeah.
it's difficult, and you can love them all you want, but you also have to understand maybe you need to take them to a psychologist. They need to go to a doctor. They need to go to a dentist. They need to go to special ed reading. And so a love is in and of itself is great, but it's not enough because these kids have so many issues to begin with. And you got to work your way through them. And I'm not going to tell you I was a perfect mom. I wasn't.
So here's the thing, knowing that they need a psychologist, knowing they need a dentist, knowing they need a doctor, and go and following through and making that happen, that is love, Ann.
No, I agree with you. I agree it is. But I think people who have never adopted or been involved in foster care think that if I just love them, that's all they
No,
need.
no, it's not an end all be all, but it's if you love them enough, you'll ask questions,
Yeah.
right? If you love them enough, you'll find out what's going on with them. If you love them enough, you'll get to the bottom line. You'll find out they're hurting. You'll find out that they need dental care. You'll find out that they need to talk to a psychologist. You'll find those things out, but you got to love them enough to ask.
Yeah.
You know, and
It
that's
was
the
hard.
thing.
That was
Yeah,
the
it is
hardest job
hard.
I've ever had.
It is
Now,
hard, and
teaching's the hardest paid
yeah,
job.
yeah.
But being a parent, oh my goodness.
Yeah. But you know, every day you're proving yourself, right? Every single day. Because these kids, when they come to you, by the time they come to you, they're programmed that the adults in their life that they think are going to love them, they're leaving.
That's right.
There's a timer, okay? And depending upon what time it is, they're out of here, and I'm going to have somebody else. That's how they're programmed because that's their
And they
defense
do it.
mechanism. That's their coping
Two
mechanism.
of my boys, they stomped out of here at
Yeah.
like 18, all angry because they were 18.
Yeah.
And then they both came back.
Yeah.
Like nothing ever changed. My oldest son, I didn't see him for a year, broke my heart. He was
Yeah.
18. And then one day he walked through the door, "Hey mom, how you doing?" Gave me a big hug, and we've been fine ever since. But
Yeah.
you have to let them expand and grow and
Well, they have to walk out into that big, beautiful world and figure out that nobody loves them as much as you do.
yeah, I think that's maybe what happened.
That's it.
Yeah,
It's
'cause
that's
we all
it.
get
It
what we
slaps them
want.
in the face and they go, "Oh, look at how good I had it." You
Right.
know? Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Let me ask you a question. I know you have a book coming out in June. We're going to have you come back. Is there anything you'd like to cover before we wrap up?
Before I'd like to cover, let me see. I would like to tell people that they should appreciate it when people tell them no.
Yeah.
No can be a gift. For me, it was a gift. Every time people said, "You can't be a sportscaster. You can't be a referee. Women aren't umpires. You don't read very well. Your grades are bad." And honestly, no made me work harder.
Yeah.
When I was first going to college, which they were surprised anybody took me, especially Miami. I still don't know how that happened. Um, my brother came into my room while I'm packing, and he said, he was at Southern Illinois. He was going to be a junior, I guess. And he said, "You'll never make it to Christmas." He said, "You're too college. I bet you $20 you're going to flunk out by Christmas."
Mhm.
I would have rather been hit by a car and killed than
Yeah.
flunk out of college.
Absolutely.
And I made the dean's list every time but once.
Mhm.
Okay. And today, don't think badly of me, but I have more degrees than my brother on my wall.
I'm not going to think
And I'm
badly
like,
of you.
yeah, there you
I'm
go,
not going to
Jeff.
think badly of you. I'm proud of you.
Yeah. Well, but you know what I'm saying is, and when
Yeah.
everybody told me no, it just
Yeah.
made me work harder
Yep.
to prove them wrong. Now
Yep.
that may not work for everybody, but to me at this age and what I've been through, I took no as a gift. Go ahead. I'll prove you wrong.
Did you watch The Dance?
No.
Okay. You should watch it
Okay.
because Michael Jordan talks about it's an ESPN special. Michael
Mhm.
Jordan talks about how people said no to him all his life. And it was a motivator for him.
Yes,
He would take
it
that and he would grab onto that and it would be a supreme motivator for him because he was going to prove them wrong. Okay.
I'm 100% with him.
Yeah.
And I would tell my students when it's funny when I was forced to be a reading specialist and
Yeah.
I went to my principal, I said, "I can't be a reading specialist." And you have to because we didn't have enough kids in the journalism program. And
Right.
so I go back to school to become a reading specialist. And that's when I learned I was dyslexic.
Right.
And it was like, it was such a relief
Right.
that I realized why I struggled with certain things. I still struggle with directions. I still struggle with numbers. But I'm a writer, so I figured out how to do it. But when I was teaching reading, I would tell my students that
Mhm.
because they were told they were too stupid to do anything.
Yep.
No, you're never going to be successful. And I told them, I said, look, I have a reading disability.
Mhm.
If I can do this, so can you. And a few kids would always nod their heads like, okay, if she could do it and everyone told her no and everybody said she was stupid, maybe I can too.
Yep.
And it's funny because I think that was one of the most valuable things I shared with my kids. That and the fact that my dad was an alcoholic and I had a sister who was a drug addict, and it made me more like them.
Mhm.
And so they got to a point where I wasn't just some random old white lady, but that I was someone who could understand not only that they might have learning disabilities, but that they came from families that weren't perfect, you know?
You know what you did today?
No.
You showed people, and perhaps thousands of people, that they can do it because you did it. That's
I
what you
want
did
them to have
today.
that message because
That's what you did today.
yeah, being when people say no, you gotta prove them wrong,
Yeah, you do.
and maybe if no one had done that, maybe if I hadn't struggled as a kid, because kids made fun of me and I was bullied and my family looked at me with despair because I was fat I and then my grades were bad, that I could have given up,
Yeah.
I think at some point, but I was just too stubborn to give up.
Well, but you have to think about this for a second. If somebody tells you you're too stupid, or somebody tells you that you can't do something, if you believe them, they win. If
Yes,
you prove them wrong, you win. So it comes down to, who would you rather have win?
right.
Life's about choices, right?
Mhm.
Pick your hard. Right?
Yep.
It's either going to be hard this way or it's going to be hard this way.
It was
One way
hard
you
both
win,
ways, but
one way you
yeah.
lose.
No, I agree, and I'm saying thank you to all those people who told me, "No, I'd never be
Yeah.
anything." Like, fooled you.
You're an amazing example. And I cannot, from the bottom of my heart, I cannot thank you enough for being on this podcast.
Well, thank you for having me, I appreciate it.
It was a lot of fun. And we'll talk to you in June when your next book's ready.
Okay.
Thanks, Ann. We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.